When I reviewed Haiku the Robot a few weeks ago, I remarked on how refreshing it was to play a stripped-back and simple Metroidvania. Well, the impossible power of the algorithm clearly heard me, because shortly afterwards, Gato Roboto crossed my path. It had been in my GOG library for a while, presumably from some bundle or sale, but I'd never given it the merest glance. Once I was told it was a Metroidvania though, the bug took over and I knew I had to play it. Finding out it's also about a cat that pilots a gun-toting mechsuit did have a lot to do with that as well though. You're listening to the almighty Backlog. I'm Ellie and today's review is on Gato Roboto, available for PC, Switch and Xbox One. This review is based on the PC version. Originally released in May of 2019, developed by Doinksoft and published by Devolver Digital. It's a Metroidvania game, and How Long to Beat has an average playtime of about 4 hours. Gato Roboto's plot has such a goofy sci-fi appeal that it's hard not to love it. There's something about the inherent absurdity of it all that really struck a chord for me. To be frank, none of it makes even the remotest lick of sense, but the game plays it completely straight-faced, and that has a charm all of its own. We begin the game with Gary, a space pilot drawn from the same stylistic school as pulp sci-fi heroes, square-jawed, hair immaculately coiffed into a Superman quiff, and built like a brick shithouse. He's on his way to answer a distress call when his ship crash lands on an unfamiliar alien world. When he comes to, he finds himself trapped in his cockpit, but out on the planet's surface is his beloved pet cat Kiki, who was thrown from the wreckage but seems not to be harmed or indeed even remotely fazed by events. Unsure whether or not Kiki can even understand his pleas over the communicator, his cat has a communicator for reasons. Gary desperately pleads for her to get help or find a way to free him. Things look bleak though. It's a hostile world out there, filled with environmental hazards, deadly threats, and automated elements of a local laboratory that turn their guns on poor Kiki. That is, of course, until Kiki finds a mechsuit and starts to absolutely wreck shop. Getting the mechsuit is, unsurprisingly, where the game begins to kick into gear. Once in it, Kiki gets the ability to both take some hits, because outside of the mech she is a tiny cat and therefore explodes at the merest glance from an enemy, and fight back. Again, outside of the mech she is just a tiny cat and therefore cannot hurt her alien foes. The suit has a Metroid-esque arm cannon bolted onto it so Kiki can blast away with relative impunity, though it does also have an ammo limit to stop you from cheesing your way through every encounter. It's one of those games where the ammo refills very quickly at least, so as long as you're not hammering the fire button all the time, you'll never really notice it. One of the game's neat tricks is that Kiki can exit the suit at any time, creating a fun duality as some sections of the game require her to leave the safety of the mech and explore without it. Most of these are signified by progress blocks of water. The suit can't handle getting wet, you see, whereas Kiki loves to swim, like cats famously don't. Though there's also an entire segment of the planet that takes place in the ventilation ducts of the lab, and so Kiki can only explore that outside of her suit since it's too bulky to fit in the pipes. Occasionally, you'll also get access to a mini submarine when you're in particularly waterlogged parts of the planet, which functions a little differently to the suit. It still has recharging shots like it, but only the suit gets upgrades as the game progresses, meaning the submarine begins the game feeling like a neat addition, but later sections you'll feel hamstrung by its lack of capabilities, and the latter portions of the game featuring it wind up more challenging as a result. I say more challenging, but that's only for a given value of the words, since Gato Roboto isn't a difficult game by any stretch. There are a few annoying enemies that can catch you unawares, but mostly you can chug along through it without too much of a struggle, though the boss fights will probably kill you a few times before you best them. As I mentioned briefly there, the suit does get some fun upgrades as you guide Kiki through the shifting terrain of this alien world. It definitely takes cues from Metroid for these, given the power-ups for the suit include missiles and a spinning jump more or less indistinguishable from Samus's classic screw attack. I think in general the Metroid influences are fairly strong with this game, but that might just be the nostalgic vibes talking. It's not necessarily done in any way that's so on the nose, but the suit certainly has elements of Samus's power suit, and there's something in the charming 1-bit pixel aesthetic that harkens back to playing the original Metroid on NES. It's only a short experience, but Gato Roboto does manage to pack in pretty much most things you'd want from a Metroidvania. There's a neat semi-linear world with plenty of branching paths to explore, lots of places that can clearly only be reached on a powered up backtrack, hidden tidbits of lore that slowly reveal the real story of what unfolded in the planet's laboratory, and a healthy plethora of collectibles to find. Of the latter, there are some fairly straightforward gameplay pieces, such as health and missile upgrades, but there is also a cute decision to have collectible cassette tapes, which unlock cosmetic changes for the game, namely changing the colour scheme. Some of these are incredibly garish, to the point of being unplayably bright or hard to pass, but I was a fan of a few of them, usually the more muted ones, and besides, they were a nice little trinket to be able to find, so I'll give the occasional eyesore a pass. I guess if I were to offer a criticism of Gato Roboto, it would be that though the simplicity is something I appreciate, in some respects it might have gone further than I would have liked. When you pare a genre down to the absolute basics, one of the first things you lose is a sense of tangible personality, both of the characters that inhabit the world, but also to the setting itself. The setting is often a silent main character of great Metroidvanias, each twisting pathway and vast open space, brimming with little clues and context indicators that speak to the wider story taking place. Gato Roboto has a little of this, but mostly the planet exists to serve the mechanics of the game rather than the story. There are obvious separate areas of the game world, but they're delineated more by mechanical gimmick than anything narrative. You've got your vents where you can't be in the mech, the water area, the hot area, that sort of thing. I don't know whether this was simply a stylistic nod to an earlier era of games, again, that is to say, basically just Metroid 1, or if it's just my having been spoiled by other Metroidvanias, but for whatever reason, I wouldn't say Gato Roboto's world is devoid of personality per se, but it's not brimming with it either. That's a shame, because when you do get the brief glimpses of the story, it's got a specific brand of inbuilt zaniness that I can't help but smile at. There's the initial silliness of the classic narrative reversal as the traditional hero character becomes a damsel in distress, but then the fact he has to ask his cat for help is a sharp left turn down Oddball Avenue, and it only accelerates from there. Again, this game is about a cat piloting a mech suit. I cannot stress how bonkers that is. Gato Roboto has so many plot elements that feel joyously cartoonish, ranging from recurring battles against an evil mouse with a plethora of massive robotic suits and weapons, to beleaguered guards wandering about the local mad scientists, to a family of living angry furnaces. The game plays all of it with a straight face, as if this is totally normal, and honestly, that really works. However, if the story is condemned to a distant second place, then Gato Roboto has to stand on its mechanical merits, and thankfully it does. It wasn't by any stretch the most complex Metroidvania I've ever played, but sometimes in simplicity lies excellence. A bit like Haiku, Gato Roboto is an example of the genre distilled down to its most fundamental parts: exploration, solitude, upgrades, fun, occasionally tense combat. The absurd principles that underpin the story are lovely, but it's the gameplay at the forefront here, and for a short Metroidvania, Gato Roboto does a really good job of getting the basics just right. The final score is 4 out of 7. Good. Sure, maybe something doesn't quite work, but at least it has heart, or a spark of excitement that makes it worthwhile despite the faults. Worth a go, if at least you can find it on sale. This has been Ellie for the Almighty Backlog. You can support this project by reading the review over on thealmightybacklog.wordpress.com, or by listening to the pod review hosted on RSS and YouTube. Please feel free to follow me over on Mastodon, Blue Sky and/or Backlogged by following the links on the blog. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can do so by donating via PayPal to thealmightybacklog@gmail.com, or by hitting the donate button on the blog. Thanks for listening, and have a lovely day.